Everything is half price at Davenport Fireworks. Everything half price. Davenport Fireworks, Dalton Pike at the state line.
Hey, Andy Morris here. Join me along with my co-host on The Drive, presented by Hardee's, weekdays at 5 p.m. on ESPN Cleveland 101.3. Cleveland and Bradley County's local sports show, weekdays at 5 on ESPN Cleveland 101.3.
From the Kia of Cleveland Studios, this is ESPN Cleveland 101.3, WCLE HD2 Cleveland, W267BI Cleveland, ESPN Cleveland 101.3.
The top of the hour is presented by Best Buy Metals, making the top of your house the best it can be. Visit bestbuymetalroofing.com.
It's time for The Drive on ESPN Cleveland 101.3, presented by Hardee's. We will bring you nonstop sports news from the national and local scene and everything in between. So buckle up, and jump in on the conversation. It's The Drive.
Don't take no slide. Got a thirst for killing. Think about it.
You heard them. Buckle up, buckle up, buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy ride on The Drive today. Listen, it is super hot outside, and I'm here for it. Andy Morris here with Jacob Mason, Jim Gum, and you know, we've joked around about Jacob being a part of this show, and excited to have him here. Not only, you know, co-hosting, but operating the board. He is present. Just want to put an emphasis on that today, that Jacob's here. He's got him a cold beverage, and sent me a text earlier, Jim, giving me a hard time, because I'm one of these people that give me 100 degrees over 30 degrees every single day, calendar day of the year, because I'm a summertime guy. I love it. I can handle it. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I know what it's like to be uncomfortable in the heat. Like, I work in it. I do stuff in it. I exercise in it. Today, I was out in it pretty much all day. It was originally supposed to be a record high of 98. I think we only got up to like 94, I believe.
Only.
But, again, can we say on air what I text you when you sent me that? I said, I'm not a wuss, okay? Like, I can handle it. It's not a big deal.
Well, I like summertime. I enjoy being outside. I'm not saying that. I think, to me, though, I can always put more clothes on. It gets so hot that you can't take enough off. Like, it's so hot outside.
You just ain't built for it, big money.
Hey, I like it.
Slim money, excuse me.
As long as I'm sitting by a pool or in a pool, but pool water's turned into bath water at this point. It's hot. It is hot.
I like warmer weather more than cold weather. I don't like mid 90 degree weather though. There's a threshold that's too hot for me. So I'd rather be a little uncomfortable cold than uncomfortable hot. I'm just like you. I can always put on a jacket. I always put on some gloves or put on a ski hat or something. But I cannot. I can only shed so many clothes. I mean, here I'm sitting here in my Speedo right now as it is. So. I mean, it is a little warm.
Well, that's the thing. When it comes to the extremes, the extreme winter, the extreme summers, the heat, like I love the heat. I'm fine in it. Listen, I'm showing up to the studio today, sun's out, guns out, with the Notre Dame tank on.
Yeah, he's got his Notre Dame. I don't want to call it a wife beater, but it's on the verge.
You can call it that. We can get Lauren on the phone. She can vouch. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But no, like, seriously though, I rushed to the studio today. Was out with the kids today. Did a little swimming. I had a fun day. We're out in it, and I will say this. I put the sunscreen on. I don't like getting burnt. That's one thing when it comes to the heat I don't like. Don't like getting burnt. I'm not like Mason over here who comes back and has got like a shade of tan that I don't think I've ever seen in my life. This young man tans
the Hawaiian
great.
Tropic look.
Yeah, I burned one time.
He tans great.
I burned once, and I paid my licking, and then after that, like I turn a
darker,
darker. Yeah, so it is a blessing. It's funny, like people talk about me and my sister like exact opposites. She did not get that same gene pool, but neither did my wife. But I do. I get tan. So I take that one burning, and then after that, dude, I know people are going to be upset. I don't even really have to put on sunscreen.
Yeah, see, my brother's like that. He tans great. My sister, she's opposite end of the spectrum, very fair skin. I'm kind of in the middle. I freckle a little bit, get a little splatter of freckles on there. That sounds attractive, doesn't it?
Good thing we're not on the video at this point, because then people will be going, "Oh my gosh!"
I won't be coming in Suns Out, Guns Out when we go video, and that is going to happen.
Pat McAfee look going on right now.
Listen, speaking of Pat McAfee, glad you went there.
Uh-oh.
So, was watching his show today and interviewed Aaron Rodgers, talked to Aaron Rodgers. Did you hear about this?
I did see a headline. It's Aaron Rodgers says this is going to be his last year as a quarterback.
Yeah, he was quoted, pretty sure this is it, why we just did a one-year deal. And you talk about that division, the AFC, and it's going to be a farewell tour for him. He's going to see a lot of people that he's played with before, and there's going to be a lot of coverage of Aaron Rodgers, but he says he kind of wants to disappear after his NFL career is over. He doesn't want to be one of these people that remains in the spotlight, doesn't necessarily want to stay around the game for, what he feels like is unnecessary attention. And I think to an extent that's commendable. That's something that is, you can respect that.
That's probably what I would do if I had the finances and I didn't have to worry about another paycheck. And I would, first off, I would travel all over. I would travel. I love going to different places. And yeah, I would probably not get into the media, because then you're kind of forced to be in this part of the world for X number of months. And like I said, if I had my druthers, I'll get all my money, and then I would try to do as much traveling as I could. But I don't blame him from wanting to get out of the spotlight, because let's be honest, he's taken so many hits nationally from a lot of media people, a lot of negativity towards him, and I feel for guys that get that thrown at them all the time. And I could see him wanting to get away from it. I really could.
He's going to disappear into one of these meditation camps he goes to.
Yeah.
Like,
They brought that up.
He literally is going to – I didn't watch – I saw the headline. I didn't watch the interview. But he is going to go to all over the world, and he's probably going to go to all these different meditation places and just be off the map. Like, that's not surprising to me. I feel like we've seen this coming.
One thing that I hope he does, and again, I'm not placing blame on him. I'm not placing blame on his family, but I hope he finds a good place with his family. I hope they can, because it's been pretty noted that there's a lot of division there. There's no communication. He's kind of cut them out of his life. And his brother, very, very famous in his own right due to the Bachelor that he did, Jordan Rodgers, who was also a former starting quarterback at Vanderbilt. Mm-hmm. And they were tight growing up. Now they don't talk. And apparently, according to Aaron Rodgers, that was kind of used. His relationship with his brother was used in The Bachelor, in the show, to kind of make an emphasis, a big moment in the show when they did an at-home visit, and they had an empty chair that was supposed to be Aaron's chair. And Aaron's like, dude, like, no one even invited me to that. Not that I would have came. So I hope that in retirement – and a lack of spotlight, they're able to kind of reconcile some differences, because I hate to see a family divided. And, again, not blaming Aaron Rodgers. It sounds like a lot of it is on Papa Rodgers, who's, been trying to. You've got a son in Aaron Rodgers. You try to capitalize off that sometimes. And whatever's went on there, I hope they fix that in his retirement.
I'm very lucky. I have a good relationship with my brother and sister. I would hate to have a strained relationship with a sibling. And I don't care how famous you are. That stuff like that's not healthy. And there's going to come a point where, listen, the reality is, your parents are going to, at someday, they're going to pass. And I'd hate to see a strained relationship at a funeral or something like that, or when they're in the hospital. That's never good. So hopefully, I hope that they can mend these fences. Maybe once he gets out of the spotlight of playing, that him and his brother can rebuild that relationship. Because stuff like that, I've never had to go through that. I have seen people that have, and I was like, it's just unhealthy for everyone involved.
Only get one opportunity here on earth to do things right. But listen, we went, just kind of deep, kind of heavy right there, right after we're talking about Suns Out, Guns Out, and weather, but yeah, listen, that's a big story. Also, one thing that broke today that's a big deal. Comedian, actor, guy that I'm a big fan of, really like him, big Notre Dame guy, Shane Gillis. Did you hear about this, Jim?
Yeah, I did.
Did you hear about this, Jacob? Shane Gillis is going to be hosting the ESPYs this year. So I'm gonna be honest with our listeners. Listen, ESPN affiliate, ESPN station here, big fan of the network, grew up on it. I haven't always watched the ESPYs, though, just because kind of we've swayed a certain way in some areas and aspects. And listen, Shane Gillis, you get this guy up there hosting this show, it is going to go off the rails, and it is going to be hilarious. I can't wait.
Shane Gillis probably has one of my favorite moments on College Game Day when he called Nick Saban Alabama Jones.
Alabama Jones.
I about fell out of it. It was when they were up there for College Game Day. He had one of those Indiana Jones style hat on with some earmuffs, and I genuinely thought Nick Saban's going to come out of retirement. He's going to go back to Alabama, schedule Notre Dame just to get right back in chains. It was hilarious.
Shane Gillis was joking around with him and said, "What is this? Not a fun place? Can we not joke here?"
Is this show just serious? Is this not? It was so fun.
And what he was joking about was paying players. Right. And coincidentally, we've got a guest on today's show. We're going to talk about all that stuff.
Yeah, Steve Berkowitz from USA Today. We're going to have him on around 5:20 today. But yeah, he's all over this kind of stuff. But I remember that I forgot about that game day. That was one of the oh my gosh moments on game day history. Really was.
Now, was that the same College Game Day? So Shane Gillis was on, being the big Notre Dame fan that he was. Was that the same one where Ryan Day got upset when they did the Lou Holtz thing? Was that the same game day?
I don't know if that was.
Or were those two different ones?
I don't know.
I don't remember. I know this much that, talking about, Coach Saban, him and McAfee, they've kind of butted heads a few times on that show. And I've always wondered, when they go to break, is there some, interesting conversation going on when the mics are turned off? I've always thought that there was a little bit of headbutting going on between those two.
Yeah, I will say, though, I feel like they've found the perfect balance with those two because, you need a guy like Pat. But then Nick Saban brings a side that really I don't know that College Game Day
has. The stability, the knowledge.
He brings a perspective that, everybody wants to hear. And then you have Pat McAfee, who then stands up in his chair 30 seconds later and
with his shirt off.
Yeah, it's doing something wild. I loved. Both of them together. I think it's a strained marriage.
Yeah,
but it's like the perfect combination for College Game Day.
Yeah, and this, guys. He's standing up. Like he says, standing up in a chair. Those chairs have wheels on them. At some point that chair is going to roll out from underneath him, and he's going to do. It's going to be hilarious when it happens. It's going to happen.
That's part of his MO, though, man. If it happened, he would play it up, and it would be part of the process, part of the show. But to what you're saying, Jacob, I do think initially, early on, Saban was just trying to figure that, this dude's weird. I got to figure this guy out. Was kind of the outlook from Nick Saban. But as the season progressed last year, you could see Nick Saban kind of loosening up a little bit more because he's like, okay, I get who this guy is now. And he made Nick Saban funnier. He made Nick Saban laugh. And by the end of the season, as we're getting into a playoff like we'd never seen before that we were all excited about, you've got him and Nick Saban hugging on set and stuff, and it was completely different from week one. So last year, the progression of that relationship on College Game Day was really cool to watch, and that's just kind of the person that Pat McAfee is anyway. He brings the fun side out in people.
Yeah, I don't know if y'all know this, but Coach Saban got in trouble with the FCC last year because he said too many four-letter words on there. He did. He said some words that they had to reel him back in a little bit and said, "You've got to clean up, Mr. Potty Mouth. You got to clean this up."
I think he could handle the fines, though, don't you?
Between all those Mercedes dealerships that he owns, and I think he can cover a few of them.
But listen, that's what, going back to Shane Gillis hosting the ESPYs, that's what kind of started. He goes, what? Now we're getting an even playing field because the Big Ten can pay players too now. And Nick Saban was like, wait a minute, we did things the right way, and to save face and say, but listen, we know that it's been going on everywhere for a long time, in different ways. Yeah, in different ways. And when we say everywhere, you know what? Maybe I'm just saying maybe when we look at Georgia Bulldogs prior Kirby Smart, maybe it was going on there. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe head coaches knew about it. Maybe they didn't. But to some extent, there was stuff going on with boosters at
every school.
Exactly. What Jim's saying, everywhere. The boosters do this stuff without the university knowing. You ever seen the movie Blue Chips?
Yes, I have.
Great movie, by the way. Yeah. Great college basketball movie. Nick Nolte,
and he was Bobby. He was the Bobby Knight of that movie, basically.
And he had always done everything right and was getting left by the wayside, a la Dabo Swinney. But
Dabo's evolving.
Exactly, and was getting left behind. And he was on there recruiting these players. Shaquille O'Neal, Penny Hardaway were a couple of the guys that were on there, and with roles. And if you get a chance to watch it, you got some downtime, go watch it. It's a great movie. But he kind of sold his soul to the devil with one of the boosters that started, paying these guys to, and they were good. They ended up being really good. But the intro to that movie, one of the funniest scenes, talking about getting who was the FCC?
FCC.
Yeah, talking about getting nabbed by those guys. If we played that scene, we'd be off air for good. But the opening scene in the locker room of that movie, one of the most funny things is he completely berates his team for being terrible. But hey, listen, it is 5:15, and we've got a guest coming on here, Steve Berkowitz, at 520 of USA Today, college football writer. And this guy is a man who is very, very knowledgeable in the business world of college sports and all the stuff behind the scenes. Excited to have him on the show with us today. With that, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back here on ESPN Cleveland 101.3.
The Drive will be back after a quick timeout. Stay tuned for more nonstop sports talk on The Drive, presented by Hardee's.
When you're craving serious burger goodness, head to Hardee's for the all-new barbecued pulled pork Frisco burger. A charbroiled, quarter-pound, 100% Angus beef patty, topped with 16 hours slow-smoked barbecued pulled pork on toasted sourdough. Only for a limited time at Hardee's. Get a free pulled pork Frisco burger when you download the app and join My Rewards. See app for terms.
Davenport Fireworks has lost their mind. Everything is half price at Davenport Fireworks. Everything half price. Davenport Fireworks, Dalton Pike at the state line.
Hip or knee pain holding you back? There's a new reason to feel hopeful. Dr. Andrew Carlone is now part of the team at Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics in Cleveland. He brings advanced training in total hip and knee replacement, including minimally invasive techniques that get you back on your feet faster. Let Cleveland's orthopedic experts help you live your best life. Call 423-624-2696 or go to sportmed.com to book your visit now.
Hey guys, this is Dan Good from Crown. Just reminding you that Crown Jeep is Cleveland and Bradley County's Jeep headquarters.
Cleveland Tire Center's 49th anniversary blowout with great specials every day, Monday through Saturday. A $200 gift card drawing every Saturday through July 3rd. Cleveland Tire Center, where the name said it all for 49 years. Davenport Fireworks has lost their mind. Everything is half price at Davenport Fireworks. Everything half price. Davenport Fireworks, Dalton Pike at the state line.
Welcome back to The Drive, presented by Hardee's. Join the conversation. Text 423-749-1013. You can also listen anywhere on our website, ESPNCleveland1013.com.
Hey, Duracell in Cleveland is now hiring mechanical skilled technicians, $22 to $27 an hour. Excellent benefits beginning day one. Medical, dental, and vision insurance, paid vacation, holiday pay, 401k, tuition reimbursement, and more. Apply now at Duracell.com. That's Duracell.com. And we are pleased to have Steve Berkowitz from USA Today joining us on the show today. And Steve, thanks for taking the time out for us, man.
Yeah, happy to do it.
All right, first question. I know there's a lot of stuff going on in the world of sports. We're going to get into a lot of things, but what do you think is going to happen with this lawsuit between Wisconsin and Miami for tampering?
I would assume that they would figure out a way to settle it in some fashion. And I'm not familiar with the contract agreement or agreements that that were signed here. And so without knowing the terms of those agreements, I think it's pretty difficult to handicap how this goes. I mean, my presumption would be that this would be a not so simple case for Wisconsin to make. But again, without knowing, if you have an idea what the particulars are of what the agreement says, then you have a better sense of how to handicap this. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, and so it's difficult for me from a distance without that kind of detail to really have a good handle on it.
Another story that I saw that you had some information about is why is the NCAA considering a moratorium on applications for schools wanting to classify to Division I? What's the reasoning there?
Well, I mean, I think the simplest situation there with that is that that there's a lot of perception within Division I and within a lot of folks who are influential within NCAA leadership that Division I is simply too big, and that there are too many schools who have moved into Division I who are not really functioning as full-fledged Division I schools in terms of their outlay in terms of their investment in their athletics programs, how much they're spending, and the kind of scale at which they're operating. And if you're a school who's very heavily invested in it, not just like with the Power 4 institutions, but if you're a school that's among the top 100 in terms of how you're spending money on this, you probably are not crazy about adding schools numerically who are who have different interests and imperatives in terms of how the NCAA's rule structure functions. I mean, this is part of the reason. This is part of what's driving a large-scale reevaluation of the entire NCAA Division I governance system, which would be set up in a fashion that would give the Power 4 conferences, if they were to be able to act in concert, they would be able to dictate a lot of the rules that would become permissive, that allow the schools to do certain things that would certainly give them greater competitive advantage, and that would prevent the majority of schools who have lesser resources from dictating the terms, to those that have more resources. So I think that they're a combination of all of those things that are going on here.
Steve, thanks again for joining us. This is Jacob. I read your article on the Congress bill. What does this newly approved NCAA settlement actually mean for college sports moving forward?
That's sort of like a twofold question here. There are a couple of different things. There are a couple of different initiatives that are working on Capitol Hill, and separately the settlement. So I'm not entirely sure what you're asking me here in terms of on things going forward. Are you talking about the impact of the House settlement, or of the things that are being talked about on Capitol Hill?
Let's start with the House settlement.
Sure. I mean, with the House settlement, the obvious and basic issue here is that schools are going to be able to directly pay their athletes now for use of their name, image, and likeness. Now, whether or not you view that as a thinly veiled version of pay for play, reasonable people can disagree, but the way the NCAA is structuring this is quite deliberate, that these payments to the athletes are being made in effect for to allow the schools to use the athlete name, image, and likeness in various promotional sorts of ways. That's the biggest thing. I mean, the other things that have come out of the settlement are the lifting of scholarship limits on a sport-by-sport basis going forward, which has been the case now. And there's going to be roster limits implemented in its place, although as a result of a compromise that sort of enabled the settlement to get final approval from the federal judge who was handling the case, there were some adjustments made that would allow athletes who were going to lose their spots because of these roster limits to not count against those limits over the next, during the entirety of their college eligibility. So, for example, if a school had 120 football players on its roster last year, and they were going to have to cut 15 of those players this year because of the terms of the settlement. And those 15 players were guys who were walk-ons on the team who were all going to be eligible and able to come back under, absent these limits. The school will still be able to carry those players. They'll carry a certain designation, and those folks would not count against the roster limit as long as they're continuing to play college sports. So there is going to be this sort of 4 to 5 year wind down period. But the flip side to that is that no schools are being required to retain any of those players. So if a school wanted to be at the new roster limit of 105 because they chose that they wanted to go from 85 football players on scholarship to 105 football players on scholarship, which they would be allowed to do since there's no scholarship limit, and they don't feel like they could pay for the additional players, they could cut those players. They would presumably designate those players as people who were cut because of the roster limits, and those people could then go to other schools, be on those teams, and not count against those teams' roster limits. So I know that gets a little complicated, but those are really the three biggest things that are affecting college sports beginning July 1 that are coming out of the House settlement.
Once again, we're joined by Steve Berkowitz of USA Today. Steve, Andy here, and I've got a little bit simpler of a question. This is more of an opinion question for you, but, we know that President Trump had met with Nick Saban a few weeks ago, I believe, and there's been a lot of rumblings from people outside of the college football camp of how things have turned into the wild, wild west. And President Trump has even been quoted saying that he sees a commissioner needing to be in place, and a lot of people have thrown Nick Saban's name out there. Is that something that you see in the future as a possibility? Not necessarily Nick Saban, but anybody, there being a commissioner to kind of help sanction and guide this whole realm of new era in college football?
Yeah, not to sound flip or, I'm not trying to be funny about this. I think it's very, very difficult to predict what President Trump will do. I just think it's really difficult to know. And there are certainly things that if he so chose, he could potentially affect by executive order. Now, as we've seen with lots of other executive orders in other areas, those orders have been subject to court challenge. I think one of the biggest things that troubles people in college sports is the transfer situation where athletes can transfer schools every year and not have to sit out. And you've had athletes winning court cases that have allowed them to extend their athletics eligibility beyond the traditional 4 seasons of competition in 5 calendar years, which has been sort of the baseline for this stuff, except in the situation of injury. And so, there is concern within the NCAA about whether or not, without intervention from Congress or in some other fashion, that other rules that have, guided eligibility of athletes will be able to stand up. But the transfer piece of this, I think, is the part that has caused the most heartburn for folks, particularly people who are who have been in college sports for the longest period of time and are accustomed to a circumstance where athletes were not able to transfer without having to sit out for a year. I think that's where all of this lies. That's where a lot of that tension lies, and there are a lot of different potential outcomes or ways to resolve that, up to and including trying to figure out a way potentially to have collective bargaining with athletes. The problem there is whether or not that can be done without athletes becoming employees, and that gets you into a whole other set of questions and issues.
Yeah, because if they become employees, they could actually unionize. Is that not correct?
I'm sorry?
If they were to be considered employees, could they unionize?
Yes. Well, yes and no. There are states that have laws against public employees being able to bargain collectively or unionize. That would become a much bigger problem for private schools. And there are states where public employees can be unionized. So, there are, again, there are a lot of different outcomes. And this, again, is one of the things that makes that Charlie Baker has spoken about, the NCAA president has spoken about on innumerable occasions, and again is driving why there's the NCAA and the conferences are so keenly interested in getting legislation passed on Capitol Hill, is that you have, lots of different state laws across a lot of different areas that affect college sports, and it makes it very difficult for the NCAA, which is sort of this notion, the whole construct of the NCAA, particularly in major college sports, is geared around this whole concept of a level playing field, such as one exists when you have Alabama competing for championships against Gonzaga. So I mean, there's always going to be places where it's not level, but the idea that you have this whole array of different state rules and regulations is what makes people at the NCAA and within college sports makes a lot of people very uncomfortable. Doesn't mean that it can't function because it has and it is, but that's not the way folks who are running college sports would like it to be.
You got schools, and they've got $20.5 million after July 1st. And obviously, we're going to see some schools that prioritize some sports over others. I mean, you've got your football schools, you've got your basketball schools. Will we see a situation where X school will give like 80% of it to football and 20% to the other sports, including the Olympic sports? Or do you think we'll see more of an even keel with some of these schools? I think it's going to be interesting to see how the schools do this.
I think you are going to see schools, heavily distribute their money toward football and men's basketball. I think you're going to see Title IX lawsuits against that, and how that will turn out. That's really hard to handicap. And the other thing to keep in mind with regard to the NIL payments for the athletes, while you're talking about the limit of $20.5 million, that's the money that the schools can directly pay the athletes. Don't forget that athletes will continue to be allowed to have third-party NIL deals. Now, what those will look like and how those deals will be evaluated as being, fair market value or pay for play, that remains to be seen. And that is, again, that's also a component of the House settlement, that there'll be this evaluation process for deals that athletes make that are worth more than $600. They will be subject to an evaluation for fair market value. And, it'll be interesting to see how collectives, which have been functioning to give athletes money for a variety of different things, how that'll work, as opposed to a circumstance where Cooper Flag has a deal with New Balance, or other athletes have deals with Gatorade, or there are two components of NIL, and schools have the ability now within the NCAA rules to help promote and connect athletes with those kinds of third-party NIL deals. So there are going to be multiple ways for schools to facilitate NIL payments to athletes, not just the money that's coming from the school.
Let me ask you this. There's been rumors, and this is a little different topic here. There's been rumors over the years that the biggest football schools could actually leave the NCAA and form just a football alliance. What's your opinion of that? Do you believe that's possible?
Yeah. I mean, do I think it's possible? Sure. I mean, what does that look like, when you put it all together remains to be seen. I mean, are you going to have the 72 biggest, football playing schools in an alliance that just connects to football, or are those 72 institutions, or however many, you choose, are those schools going to essentially form their own all sport association,
Right.
or what? A big thing that binds together the NCAA's Division I, as we know it now, is the Division I men's basketball tournament, which is an event that lots of people really like, and obviously generates a lot of money. Now, for the football schools, the college football playoff is going to generate more money than the basketball tournament generates for them. But if you take action that blows apart the current format of the Division I men's basketball tournament, you potentially have some legal issues with this. And, again, publicly, there may be college sports fans who would like, man, I'd rather see, an all-comers, men's basketball tournament that revolves around those 72 institutions. But I guarantee you that schools like Gonzaga and Butler and Villanova and VCU that have been part of the fabric of what makes the Division I men's basketball tournament really cool for a lot of people, those schools wouldn't be included, alongside Alabama, Penn State, Michigan, and Tennessee in a 72 or 70 school all sport, association that sort of separates from everybody else. And I think folks might be surprised at some of the schools that would be left aside. I think there's a lot of concern on the part of schools like Syracuse and Boston College, potentially, schools like Kansas State, that they end up where Oregon State and Washington State have ended up,
right?
Which is when, all the dominoes fell out of the Pac-12, nobody was interested in working with Oregon State or Washington State. And Cal and Stanford, which have been bellwether programs nationally, for a long, long time, were left in a very difficult competitive and negotiating position to get their slots in the ACC. There are a lot of different things. But do I think that could happen? Yeah, absolutely. And I think the place where you're going to potentially see this is where you're going to potentially see this the demarcation point is down the road, like 4 or 5 years, when all of these conference television agreements and the NCAA's television agreement for the men's basketball tournament start to come up. And that's all happening in the early 2030s. Wow. It's not that far down the road.
No, it's really not. Once again, joined by Steve Berkowitz of USA Today. And Steve, here in our listening area, big audience for the Tennessee Volunteers. And it was no secret nationally what took place with Nico Iamaleava leaving right as spring practice was getting started. And everyone's very well aware at this point of that whole debacle up in Knoxville and him going to UCLA. Do you foresee a point where the transfer portal becomes more limited with per se the time span of the portal when these athletes are able to make these moves? Because it's specifically Tennessee, it's put them in a spot. It worked out. They kind of did a swap with UCLA, getting Joey Aguilar to come over, but he's got a very limited amount of time to not only learn the playbook but take snaps, missing an entire spring practice. So what's your opinion as far as the transfer portal being limited as far as opportunities that students have to go to other schools?
I think they may try to limit this, and they may continue to tinker with what's the best timing for the transfer portal windows. But, it's, again, you start taking things away from athletes, and you're running into the prospect of legal challenges in how you're functioning with this stuff. I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of a drag, if any, on transfer you'll see from what I'm assuming will be provisions negotiated into the school NIL contracts that will, tether athletes to those schools either through buyout, that will attempt to tether those athletes to schools through buyouts or other means that are legal. It's like, whether or not, coaches have gigantic buyouts, and it doesn't prevent coaches from moving because the school that wants to hire a coach just pays the buyout on the coach's behalf, and that's the way you go. It'll be interesting to see whether athletes are willing to agree to contracts that include buyout provisions, and what happens if an athlete transfers. How willing will another school be to pay that athlete's buyout to the former school? So, I mean, I think you're going to there are quite a few factors here that could play a role in how the transfer portal, how the athletes' transfers functionally work going forward.
Steve, we appreciate your time, man, and hopefully we can catch up with you down the road.
Sure, happy to do it. Appreciate you having me on.
All right.